Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Jeff Fenster, thank you so much for joining us for the Mike Litton Experience, bud. I know you're busy. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to do this. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you for having me, Mike, and I'm excited for the mission behind this new show. I love the passion, and we were talking offline about kind of what your goals are for the show and how you're impacting humans, and so it's an honor and privilege to come on, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, buddy. Like I told you before, I'm a huge fan of yours. We're going to talk about this book in a little while, but my biggest thing is this, and we talked about this. We know that everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, what we'd like to do is start with where you were born, and then basically let's go through your life, right, up until today, and we can talk about anything you want to talk about, and obviously we want to talk about this, okay?
Sure, yeah. I was born here in sunny San Diego.
Beautiful. You're a native.
Native. I'm first American born in the family. My parents and sister moved from Montreal, Canada, right before I was born, and I was born here. So first American in the entire family tree.
That's awesome, bud.
But I'll preface, started in, I was born in the Kaiser down in, off of near Fashion Valley, but it was in Del Cerro.
Okay.
It is near Patrick Henry High School.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Scripps Ranch. Nope. I moved to Scripps Ranch when I was 2 years old and grew up in Scripps Ranch, went to Scripps Ranch High School, go Falcons, Wagenheim Middle School, Mira Mesa.
Beautiful. So what was your favorite thing about growing up in Scripps Ranch?
It was a different time in the 80s and 90s. So it's hard because for those who are young won't appreciate this, but anyone who's, 35 and up, I'm 40. The world was very big back then. You didn't have the internet. So your entire source of truth was whatever your parents told you were true, your teachers, or if you had the Encyclopedia Britannica collection, that was like the whole world. So growing up in Scripps Ranch was fun because in San Diego, it's filled with trees and it's like our version of country living in a big city. I mean, we didn't have acres. We had, we were in a suburban neighborhood, but the houses were far enough apart that you couldn't reach out and touch your next door neighbor's house. Right. Like a lot of homes are built today. And
them a beer. Yeah.
Yes. And there was a lot of outdoor playing. So I was never inside. There was no internet, no TV, no computer in my house till I was 14 or 15 years old. So I really got to enjoy nature. There were so many trees, building forts, playing games, playing sports. I mean, this is a dent on my cheek, not a dimple from getting checked on the street. So my life was pretty much go outside and play sports till mom yelled, the street lights are on, come home. And so I really enjoyed the simplicity of growing up in Scripps Ranch. It was middle class, so it wasn't super rich, super poor. Like it was comfortable. We all had enough money, but not too much where we were parents weren't driving extremely fancy cars. And it was a good childhood. I mean, if I could duplicate that for my kids, I would. Unfortunately, in today's world with technology, it's not possible, but it was a good childhood. The thing is, and I'll start by saying, and I say this on stages, I'm an ordinary guy. I'm 5'9", average height. I'm athletic, but not professional sports athletics. I went to college and law school, but I'm not Mensa smart. I didn't get a 1600 on my SATs. I got an average SAT score, 3.8 in high school. Like I'm on the higher end of average. And the thing is, I never could figure out what I was really going to do with my life. I wanted to be a professional athlete. Wasn't good enough. Even though, and the funny thing I joke is, I went to high school with Kellen Winslow, who is now in prison, but played in the NFL.
Junior. Kellen Winslow,
yeah, junior. Yeah. Okay. And so we played football together, and I can tell you the scouts were there. They didn't not see me. They saw me and chose not to take me. So I don't have that in my back of my mind. Well, maybe if I had only been seen. No, I was seen and I wasn't selected. And I could never see myself doing that one thing. My dad was a doctor. My mom was a teacher. And they were like, you got to find that thing, your career. You got to find that thing you can do. And I grew up in a house that the word entrepreneurship or business ownership was never in the cards. It was lawyer, doctor, accountant, pick one, because that's how you can make some money. And, they're old school kind of parents that thought that way. And so I really never had no idea what I was going to do. And so I bounced around from job to job. I would try things. And my mom and dad would used to always say, like, Jeff, you've got to find something. Like, no subject got me. I was never in love with any of it. And so I say all this because I think for a lot of people are similar. Now that I travel the country and I talk to a lot of people are like, yeah, I don't feel like I'm exceptional at one thing. And I don't know how I'm going to get to the top of this one thing. And I don't really like that thing. And I don't want to spend 40 years doing something. And so a lot of my high school was really trying things. I mean, I worked for 8 different companies. And I say companies, I had 8 jobs: Blockbuster Video, Pickup Sticks, Walter Anderson's Nursery, delivering pizzas at Domino's, making pizzas at Pazzo's Pizza, working at mailboxes, etc. Like, if you had a job, I'd take it. And if I didn't like it, I'd quit. Like, it was no stick-to-itiveness. I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out. And it was true about all things like sports. I played football and baseball very competitively, but otherwise I played everything. I just liked activity, and I did not like school, did not like offices, but I always interned. And I did that through my childhood because growing up in Scripps Ranch, as I mentioned, you don't really have a lot of exposure to things outside of your neighborhood back then. And so my mom and dad, fortunately, used to always say to me, like, hey, Jeff, go get an internship to make your college resume stronger. It was never for anything other than that, but I saw something else from it when I went and did an internship with a family friend at his, it's called Black Rock, not Black Rock like that everyone else knows, but it was like a small office called Black Rock Investments, and it was like stock market. And I would just be there doing boxes and nonsense, but I was exposed to this environment. Or David Meltzer, who's one of my longest mentors, he was the CEO of a publicly traded company. I got to go intern for him for a summer, and I got to intern at his interior door replacement company. I got to just see business and meet adults when I was a teenager. And I started to learn things without realizing I was learning it, that carried into the book, which we'll get to, and how I've been able to build a career taking what was a perceived weakness into a positive. And that's my entrepreneurial ADD, if you will, or the fact that I don't like to do one thing over and over and over again for 40 years. So my childhood was really a blessing in disguise. While I was not a bad kid, I pushed the limits. I got in some trouble, did the stupid things kids do, girls sneaking out, doing dumb things I probably shouldn't do and want to probably put on tape. But
you still don't want your parents to know about?
I mean, actually, I have a funny story. I've actually never shared this. So when I was 17 years old, me and 2 buddies went down to Tijuana, and we were going to go get cigarettes because you can't get them at 8. You had to be 18 here. There was no ID. So we went down there to get cigarettes. Well, one of my buddies bought a bottle of Valium. And as we bought it from a little pharmacy. Well, we didn't know, but the pharmacy has a deal with the customs agents that when American teenagers come, call ahead, they get their drugs back, and we get popped at the border. So as we're driving back from Mexico across the U.S. border in my truck, just me and 2 buddies, they pull us over, they search the thing, they find the Valium, and it wasn't like a felony or anything, but it was a 4-hour detainment and, the whole thing. Well, fast forward, my dad was going for global entry about 6-7 years ago. And in the interview, because I was in his car registered to him, they pulled him aside and said, Mr. Fenster, are you still doing any smuggling? And he found out about it 20-something years later because of global entry. So, dumb things as kids.
You have something you want to tell me, son?
Yeah. Like, hey, what the hell did you do with my car? And I can assure you, I don't know where I'd be if my whole childhood was on tape like these kids today, because we were dumb kids, but it was important. It was part of my childhood. And then I went to college at University of Arizona. I went there thinking I was going to have a business major. And I went there and I boxed at the university. And my grandfather was he was a pharmacist, but he also was a professional boxer. He had only daughters, and I was his oldest grandson, and boxing was his thing. So I took that up as a thing we shared together. And after I broke my nose twice, I realized I don't want to be a boxer. I'm 5'9" with short arms, so I get hit a lot. And I didn't see a path to riches. I didn't see myself as the next Floyd Mayweather. So switched my major like 4 times in college from business. I couldn't do the accounting class. So I dropped out of that and switched to something else. Then finally I ended in regional development with a minor in law. And I almost dropped out of college. I was like, this isn't for me. So my sophomore year, my dad's like, don't drop out, just graduate early, take extra classes and just get done, just get the degree, finish. So I did. I took summer school that year. My third year of college was my last year. I did U of A in 3 years,
Mhm.
graduated at 21, and still didn't really know what I was going to do. I wanted to be a sports agent, but you had to have a law degree, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get into law school because my college grades were okay, not fantastic. And college, law school doesn't really like young 21-year-olds. They really want you to have maturity. And so they tend to want older, established people. It helps with the resume unless you have like a walk on water resume. And so I applied to law schools across the country and I enlisted in the Marine Corps at the same time. And I told the Marines that if I get into law school, I'm going to go to law school, but if not, I'll join the Marine Corps, and did the ASVAB, took the test, was going to be a special police. And this was 2000 and this is for summer of 2001. No, excuse me, summer of 2004, excuse me, not
Right.
2000, 2004, right after I think they had just invaded Iraq after Afghanistan.
Right.
And I picked a job, special police, that I knew I was going to stay in the US for the first 3 years of my thing, protecting military bases, nuclear stuff. I didn't really want to go to Iraq. So that job seemed okay. And I got into 2 law schools, and one in Miami and one in Orlando. And I told the Marines I'm going to go to law school. And then I went to my first year of law school in Miami at 21 years old. And to be a sports agent was the plan, and did really well. Transferred to San Diego at Thomas Jefferson after my first year and finished law school at 24 here in San Diego, and was going to be a sports agent. Had a job lined up at Lee Steinberg Sports Agency through David Meltzer, who was the president of Lee Steinberg's agency. And I had Kellen Winslow as a friend and a bunch of other athlete friends, like Sean Merriman was a good buddy. He bought a house when he became to the Chargers right up the street from my parents. So we started hanging out and just had a lot of access to athletes and friendships that could open doors. And so I was like, okay, I can't play sports. I'll be in the sports world. And my third year of law school in San Diego, I met the woman who's now my wife, and we have a daughter. And I realized when I graduated law school with a daughter and a fiance, I didn't want to travel around the country and world representing grownups, because back then, before social media, you had to physically, we didn't have Zoom. So you had to physically go to every meeting. You were gone 24/7. All of the sports agents were divorced or in terrible marriages. And I was like, and didn't have relationships with their kids. And I had that moment where I was like, okay, I don't want to do this. So I got a job selling payroll for a company called ADP. And, you know, my dad was pretty pissed at me because he's like, you just took out 6 figures in law school loans, went to law school. You're not a lawyer. You're not a sports agent, and you got the job. You still don't know what you're going to do. And you're jumping around again. Like, you're still the same teenage kid.
Here you go.
Figure out what he's going to do. And now you have mouths to feed. Like, you have responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'll figure it out. So I got a job selling payroll for a company, ADP, and utilizing relationship capital. The years I'd spent interning that I had mentioned before in San Diego with a bunch of businesses and making friendships with people older than me allowed me to quickly go to them and say, hey, I'm selling payroll. Who do you know you could introduce me to that could help me get ahead? And they opened their Rolodexes for me, and they were literally Rolodexes or pamphlets with actual business cards. And
back then,
yeah, warm introductions were made. And my first 6 months at ADP, I was the #1 sales rep in the country and made President's Club, made 6 figures, did all the things that I was like, this is great. Like, I'll just do this forever. And bought a house, my first house in Mira Mesa in 2007, and moved my family in. And thought this was wonderful. And okay, this is going to be what we do. And funny enough, January 2008, I had hit a milestone that my employer had put into my contract that said, because I got $38,000 base pay plus commission. And I don't know where you live in the country, but in San Diego, $38,000 is zero.
Yeah.
Like zero.
Might be less than zero. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we pay $5 a gallon for gas. Like, you just can't survive on that, let alone take care of your family. The commission helped me, and I made 6 figures through commission, but I had negotiated, how do I get a bigger base? They said, sell this amount. So I did. And I did it in 6 months. I went to my boss, Ashley, in January of 2008, and I said, hey, I achieved the milestone. When do I get my raise? And she said, not to the end of the fiscal year, which would be the end of June. You get it in July, which was 6 months from now. And I just remember the feeling of, like, you see almost like a snapshot of your future and you're just unhappy. You're like, is this really going to be my life, where regardless of what I do, like, I'm the #1 sales rep, so I can't do better than that.
Right.
And I still can't get my raise until then. And I was 24 at the time. And I remember having a huge ego, and I threatened to quit if they wouldn't give it to me, thinking there was no way they would let Jeff Fenster walk out the door. I was wrong. And they said, listen, you can quit if you want to quit. She went to battle for me up the chain, but there was nothing that they were going to do. And she's like, you can quit if you're going to quit, but we can't give you the raise. And so I went home and I told my fiance, I want to sell the house, move in with my parents. I want to start my own payroll company because F80P. And that was really just the chip on my shoulder. And she said, okay. My dad was livid because here I am now quitting the 6-figure job and I have a house and a kid and a fiance. And now I have a successful career at 24, like which he didn't think I was going to have.
Right.
And quitting that to do something like start my own payroll company. He's like, Jeff, you've been there 6 months. Like, what do you know about any of this? But he said something to me and I've never forgot it. And I think it's important for people listening because he said, you don't have the privilege to chase wild, crazy dreams. You have kids. And I said, Dad, I see that the opposite side. I think I have an obligation to go after my dreams because I have kids. They're looking up to me. They're going to
watching you
and emulate me. So if I settle and I stash my dreams and hopes away and I just do what I have to do and settle with my life, I'm teaching them that when they're grown up, they're going to settle.
That's the wrong example. Yeah.
It's the wrong example. And I think the problem a lot of us make is we think we have to sacrifice our dreams to make better for our children. But what we fail to realize is we're creating a vicious cycle, which they're going to do the same thing. Instead of teaching them to go after it with everything they've got, I can always get another job. Clearly, right? Jobs are available. It may not be my dream job, but if I'm going to settle, I can settle later. Let's swing for the fence. If I miss, I can always settle. I'm not going to settle out the gates. And so he said, okay, you guys can come stay with us, but he was not happy about it. And so I quit my job, sold the house, moved in with my parents, and started my first payroll company, a payroll business out of my mom's kitchen called iChecks with a buddy of mine. And that was my foray into entrepreneurship, which I never thought I would be in. I had never said that word before. If ADP would have given me my raise, I'd probably still be there today. Who knows? I mean, maybe I'm running the company. I don't know. But because of them, I became an entrepreneur, and that was my thrust into it. And so grew that company. Of course, 2008 was the Great Recession, so the timing couldn't have been worse. But same thing. I utilized making friends, solution-based selling, relationship capital. That's how I grow my businesses. That's how I sell all my products and services. And I don't do transactional sales. I do lifelong sales. So I don't sell you something and never see you again. I find a solution for a problem you have, and then I'll find another solution for your next problem over and over and over again. And I'm going to build that long-term value-based relationship. So we're friends forever. And so I was able to sell a lot of payroll, build the company with my buddy, and we sold it in 2011 to a company in Florida. And then during that process, I had started a recruiting agency that I had also sold in 2012 and had my second daughter in 2011. So now I had 2 kids, a 6-year gap, and didn't really decide what, once we sold the company, I was like, okay, now what? I figured I wanted to work from a computer. So I started a digital marketing agency, and through a friend, Pat Flynn, I got introduced to Neil Patel and convinced Neil to be my partner. And so we partnered together for about 4.5, 5 years and worked with some of the biggest websites out there and had a lot of fun, making a lot of money, doing a lot of cool stuff. I also had a couple of failures before the digital marketing. So everyone understands it's not all successes. I had a few tries in companies that just didn't work out. But what's cool is you don't have to spend much time on your failures. And I think society, we spend too much time being the victim of things that go wrong. But really quickly, if you forget about them and move on to what's next, like I've been asked, like, hey, why don't you talk more about your failures? And you're always talking about positivity stuff. Like, why don't you spend more time on the negatives and the failures? And it's because I don't spend much time there because I want to replace them with positive. And if I give them too much attention and intention, then they become bigger in my brain, they become bigger in my world, and they become longer in my life. But if I quickly move on, they're gone.
Well, you learn, right?
You learn
valuable lessons from failing fast, right?
Failing fast.
You move on with life. You learn what you need to learn. You move on. My son was on a basketball team in high school, and he was the MVP. So junior and senior year, last 2 years, and he was by far the most dominant player on the team. And when he would play these Division I recruits, he would absolutely just dominate them. And there were scouts in the seats. There were scouts scouting these guys. They saw him. They saw what he did. Right? He never got any play because he was with a Division V school and that kind of thing. So they didn't pay attention to him. So he didn't have a scholarship in basketball coming out of high school. But he would lose a lot. Like his team lost a lot. And I kept telling him, you're going to learn more from losing than you ever will from winning, ever, right? Just focus on getting better, you know? I mean, it's a big, big deal, and it's a big lesson in life. And you want your kids to watch you do that. You want them to see you as an example, like you're saying, to go through that. Let me ask you a couple of real quick questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
And by the way, there's a couple of stories that I want you to tell and by the way, just so you know, this is a really, really tiny world we live in. You mentioned it earlier when the world was bigger, right? So you and I scheduled our appointment to do a Zoom interview for our podcast. 2 days later, I'm in a room with a guy that's talking about different companies that he works with and different people that he works with, and he throws an Everbowl logo up on the screen, and I'm literally sitting there going, I'm going to be talking to Jeff in just a few days, right? Literally a matter of days. So Roland Frazier taught Epic for 2 days, and I had an opportunity to audit, if you will, that class. Sam Cormian, Sam, invited me to come be a part of it for 2 days. So it just absolutely blew my mind. I'm literally sitting there and Roland's telling me, oh yeah, we're in business together, the whole thing, right? So
Roland's great.
Small world.
I've known Roland forever.
Yeah, it's tiny, man.
Virgin Summit back in my digital marketing days. He's an investor in Everbowl. We did a bunch of business deals together. He's an incredible guy.
Yeah, he really is. He blew my mind for 2 days. I mean, it was crazy. So question for you, or a couple of questions for you. Yeah. When you were in high school, did you have you mentioned football and baseball, right? Did you have a particular sport that you preferred?
I loved football more. I was better at baseball.
Okay. What position did you play in football?
Running back and cornerback.
Oh, got it. Okay, cool.
And I can tell you, I still to this day think if given the chance, could have done something. But,
yeah.
See.
Well, I mean, it's
never know. Maybe I'll be the next Vincent Papali.
There's a lot going on in the sports world, in terms of typecasting, right? And putting people under this particular, right? And what's interesting to me is if you look at, and this is why I love people's life stories, if you look at some of these people like Austin Eckler, right? Who
good friend of mine. Love Austin.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable, right? Came out of nowhere, and now is one of the highest paid, one of the most productive running backs in the NFL.
And he's also an entrepreneur. He's got an incredibly cool new company that he's working on that you'll be hearing a lot about, and it's going to change the entire dynamics with college sports and how they interact with athletes in the NIL space. And I was just doing a call with him and his team last week as we're kind of going through some stuff, and I'm excited for him. I mean, he's the total package on and off the field.
I'd love to get him on this podcast if you can.
Happy to connect you.
That'd be awesome. So those are the stories that I love, right? So growing up, who was the most influential person to you growing up?
That I knew or that I didn't know but looked up to?
Well, just the most influential person. So like, for instance, in my life, the most influential person in my life growing up was my grandfather. He was like a father to me. We were super, super close. In fact, we were in business together for 9 years, that kind of thing. So anybody who was the most, when you look back on your childhood, who was the most influential person? Doesn't have to be family. Just who was the person that sticks out?
I mean, it actually is my grandfather.
The boxer.
Yeah. I mean, he was in Montreal, so I only got to see him a couple times a year. I went there all summer when I was growing up as a kid, but if he went to the bathroom in the middle of the night, I woke up and followed him. I mean, I just couldn't.
You were a shadow. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.